Hello and welcome to our 14th video in our seasonal sampler series. In this video you'll learn about needle turn applique and how freezer paper can act as sort of training wheels to help you master this method. Once you learn to needle turn, you'll be able to tackle almost any applique project. You'll also discover a trick for making these stems. Ready to begin? Find this supply list below with a link to these free handouts and to the other tutorials in this series. Choose the leaf pattern for your flowers. I'm adding 2 larger leaves and a medium-sized one, but you can add as many as you like. You'll use freezer paper to hold the leaf shape. Freezer paper comes in a roll and can be found at the supermarket in the aluminum foil aisle. There's a shiny side and a plain paper side. You'll want to trace your leaves on the plain paper. Cut out your leaves and place the shiny side face down on the wrong side of the fabric. Use a hot dry iron to press this in place. Cut about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. You can purchase trim for the stems or make your own from fabric. This one's about 1/2 of an inch wide, but you can make yours any size. To make this stem, I'll be using this 1/2 inch bias bar that I purchased in a set. You can make your own bias bar from heavy cardboard. This strip is 1/2 of an inch, but you can cut any size that you desire. If you can't find a big piece of cardboard, it's okay to cut a shorter strip. To determine this cutting size, you want to double the size of your strip, which in this case is 1/2 of an inch, and then you want to add 1/2 of an inch for seam allowances. So 2 times 1/2 is 1 inch, and you add 1/2 an inch to that, and your strip size is going to be 1.5 inches. Take your strip and put wrong sides together. I used a scant 1/4 inch to sew this together. Trim about 1/8 of an inch off of the seam allowance. Place the bar inside the stem and then maneuver seam allowance to the center of the bar. I then press the stem as it comes off the bias bar. After pressing, you can cut your desired length. You might be wondering why they call these bias strips. The reason why is because usually you're cutting your fabric on the bias edge rather than the straight of grain, because stems often curve. These stems just go straight up and down, so cutting on the straight of grain or cross grain is okay. But if we wanted to put a little curve in it, you want this bias because it will stretch for you to go around those curves. So most of the time these bars are used to make stems from bias cut fabric. From the background fabric, cut a piece 18.5 by 19.5 inches, and then this bottom piece 18.5 by 3 inches. The grass is 15.5 by 2.5 inches, and then you'll cut 2 2.5 by 2 inch rectangles from the background fabric. Using 1/4 inch seams, sew these on the ends of the grass fabric. Next, stitch the bottom section to the grass and press. Lay out your flowers in a pleasing arrangement. You can add more flowers or take away a flower, whatever you like. Once you decide where the flowers will go, lay out your stems and leaves. Cut each stem a little bit longer than needed. Take a photo of your design for future reference. Often when you applique, you need to think in layers, as in which applique piece is a bottom layer, a middle layer, or the top layer. These leaves fit under the stem. The stem fits under the flower. So the leaves would be the first layer to be appliqued. Next comes the stems, and then the flowers would go on last. My leaves pinned in place and I'm ready to needle turn. I've thread my needle with a single strand of contrasting thread so you can see, but you'll want to use either a matching thread to the leaf or a matching thread to the background. In needle turn applique, you'll use your needle to turn that seam allowance under. And I'll take my thumb and hold that down. So let me do that again. Take your needle and turn that fabric under and hold your thumb over that to keep it in place. Start stitching. I'll come up from the back right next to that edge, take a little bite out of the leaf, and I'll go back down in almost the exact same spot. I'll scoot over about 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch, and I'll come up and take another little bite out of that. I'll continue stitching in this manner until I have to turn some new fabric under. If I find that the fabric wants to sort of slip away, I can take my needle and just sort of poke into that fabric to hold on to it and then bring it to the back. When you come to a corner, I'm going to take a stitch and then take another stitch in almost the exact same spot to sort of anchor it. I want this fabric to go down, but you'll see I have a little extra there. Poke this with my needle and then I'll hold on to that and turn it all the way around till I push it back up against my stitches. Take another stitch right here and I'll continue stitching across. So here's another corner. Put my stitch in, put a second stitch there to hold it while I maneuver. Use my needle to turn that fabric down. Hold on to it with my thumb. And there's a little extra here. No, there's a lot extra. So I'll take my needle and sort of puncture that fabric just a little, just enough to get a hold of it, and I'll turn that around and push it inside. And once that's done, I'll take my stitch in the corner and I'll continue stitching. When you get to the point on the leaf, you pretty much do the same thing as you did in the corner. So you take one stitch, come up in almost the exact same spot, secure that while you maneuver. And like before, you're going to take the needle and turn that under. But you can see I've got a lot of bulk up there that's got to fit into this point. This needs to be trimmed out, but you still want to have some fabric that you can hold on to. So let me show you what you need to trim. Instead of trimming the top here, I'll move this to the back so you can see, and I'll trim out a little section right here. That will reduce that bulk. It doesn't look like I've trimmed anything out, but it'll make a difference. So let me turn this under, and when I get up here, I want to take my needle, just sort of jab it in very lightly just to grab that and to pull that around and push it in there. And I can double check to make sure that that's all in there, and I'll continue stitching. Here's my completed leaf. Just turn it over. Use my scissors to sort of poke when you feel the paper stop, and I'll trim 1/4 of an inch seam all the way around. Then I can just reach in and pull out that paper. Usually paper is not used for needle turning. The shape is traced on the right side of the fabric. You use your needle to turn that fabric along that line. After you stitch a little, you'll cut a little bit more fabric, needle turn that under, and continue stitching. If you would like more detailed instructions about this type of applique, check out our video on needle turn. Once you learn to needle turn, you can applique just about anything. It's a really good skill to have. Place your stems and flowers on the background and then pin your stems in place. I like to hand stitch these down, but you can machine stitch these if you choose to do so. After applying the stems to the background, you're ready to add the flowers. Like the stems, you can stitch these by hand or on the machine. If machine stitching this flower, you'll want to remove the paper first. But before you do that, you'll want to press these edges in place with the hot, dry iron. Then remove the basting stitches or pull away from the glue and pull out the paper. And you're ready to pin. When everything's been appliqued in place, sew the bottom section to the top and press. Your top is now ready for quilting. In the next video in the Seasonal Sampler series, you'll start working on the Springtime Sampler. First, you'll learn how to sew a mitered corner when making these baskets. Hope you stay tuned. If you've been following this series, you've added many new skills to your quilting toolbox. Now's a good time to start experimenting using these skills. You can change up this pattern by trying out different sizes, flower centers, and edgings. Or make up your own pattern. We'd love to see what you come up with. So happy you visited LearnHowToQuilt.com. Please share our free patterns and videos with your friends. Thanks.